Hello, everyone. Welcome to another micro lesson by the Container Brothers. My name is Michael, and I'm the Senior Director of Products at Apprenda.
And I'm Eric Luskarden, Senior Solutions Engineer here at Apprenda.
Today, we'll be talking about Splunk integration. With the latest release of Apprenda 6.6, one of the things that we have implemented is the ability for any developer or operator to take all of the logs that are coming out of the system in Apprenda, that includes application logs, core Apprenda services logs, and anything the platform logs, and push them into any external system like Splunk, Elk, or any other log aggregation or operational intelligence platform. We have open sourced all of that work on GitHub, and today we're going to show you how you can take advantage of that work to be able to push your logs into Splunk. That will allow you to do some advanced things like set up alerts based on your logs, look at notifications, do some debugging, analysis, identify trends, even do security analysis. All of this is possible through this integration that we have enabled. So let's go ahead here and show you. The first thing here is our GitHub page with all of the details on how you can download the binaries or even look at the source code yourself and integrate the Apprenda Cloud Platform 6.6 with Splunk. I'm not going to go through this in very big detail, but I'm just going to walk you at the high level. We have our code repository that includes an add-on for Apprenda, the log forwarder extension, as well as some testing PowerShell script that allows you to look at some statistics coming out of the log forwarder. We have our integration steps, how you set up Splunk, how you set up the add-on in Apprenda, and how you set up the extensibility service in Apprenda to push the logs, and so on and so forth. So all of that is possible. You can go ahead and read this page in detail through github.com/apprenda/Splunk. And most importantly, there's a source code repository here that includes the Visual Studio projects for every single one of the files, as well as projects that are necessary to make this happen. So let's switch hats here and go into Apprenda so we can look at some of the applications that I have uploaded as a developer. So the first one is the log forwarded application. That's the application that I downloaded from GitHub. It implements a WCF endpoint that will receive all the logs from Apprenda, including guest application logs and core platform logs. How Apprenda knows how to send all the logs to the log forwarder is controlled by the system registry and is basically following the same principles that our extensibility service will follow for allowing an operator to participate in platform operations. You can learn more details by looking at some of the links through the GitHub page as well. The second application is a malicious logger. We're going to use this to send some 200, 300, 400 log messages in a very quick manner to the platform. These are test messages that our application could log just to demonstrate our log forwarding capability. And the last thing that we have here is a test logger, another sample logging application that allows us to log a single message just to showcase the indexing capabilities of Splunk. So we showed you these three applications, and these are what me as a developer get to see. Switching over here to the operator portal, the first thing I want to show you is the add-on that we have implemented for Splunk. So if I click on the platform add-ons here, I see the Splunk symbol here, and I see one of the add-ons. And there's two very important details that me as an operator get to define here. From a configuration standpoint, I get to define the endpoint of the HTTP event collector for Splunk. And this is something that I can get from Splunk when I create an account with them. And the second thing is the access token that would enable me to have the privilege of being able to send in logs into Splunk.
Yeah, this is something that's very important when you're thinking about the add-ons. And we haven't covered this in any previous video by the Container Brothers, but the add-on mechanism allows the operations team of Apprenda to expose additional services to developers, but in a controlled and compliant way. And really, when you're building, and our customers are building these add-ons themselves, we have a collection of add-ons that we've made available on GitHub, or that our client services team has that they've used with other customers. But it's really a way for connecting Apprenda and exposing these additional services to the developers in a control way. One of the advantages of doing this through Apprenda is that you have a consistent way of offering and consuming these services. So for example, if you want to expose public cloud resources like storage or things like that, you can make sure that developers are always using, for example, an encrypted repository or things that are controlled by your team. They're using your organization's account to leverage these services. You can track who's using them via Apprenda. You can enforce constraints on how many instances can a development team consume and what sort of capabilities do they have, just like Michael is showing right now on the screen. And those are very important because it allows you to offer this catalog of services that might not be natively working on or running on Apprenda, but still have a consistent, standardized way of funneling and leveraging them. And you'll see when we actually go to consume these add-ons, how the consumption mechanism works from a developer's point of view.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. So I think this is an important point here. We at Apprenda have add-ons and extensibility into a lot of different platforms and services, from different services that AWS provides, Windows Azure, Google Compute Cloud, as well as things from Cisco, NetApp. So we have a very big library of extensibility that allows us to broker controlled access into external system, which is exactly what's happening here in Splunk. No developer will be able to control the redirection of logs into Splunk without having access to some of the details that we entered here in the Splunk add-on, including the ability for them to configure an Apprenda application as an extension point for the logging framework. So the operator gets to control that access, so the developers don't get access to logs that they shouldn't primarily have. So let's take a look a little bit at our Splunk configuration here, and then we'll dive into the logging right away. So the first thing I want to show you is the data inputs. As I showed earlier on the Splunk add-on, one of the things that we controlled and entered data for was the HTTP event collector for Splunk. So this is where you configure it in Splunk, and you see here that I have one input here. So there is one HTTP event collector that I have configured specifically so that Apprenda can set data to this. The second thing that I have configured here is an index, and an index helps us basically massage the data and have better access to it so we can run a lot of our analytics. And I have created the Apprenda logs index that's tied to the HTTP event collector that we mentioned earlier. So now as an operator, I did a few things. I created an HTTP event collector. I created an index for it in Splunk. I went into Apprenda and I created an add-on that gave me access that would allow me to give brokered access into this information to a developer. Now, as a developer, I can come to my developer portal. I can click on add-ons, and I get to see the Splunk add-on here. And one of the things that Eric mentioned earlier, as a developer now, I get to instantiate an instance of this add-on if my operator allowed me access to do so. And when I do that, I name my add-on Splunk add-on here, and I get a connection data instance token. And what that means is that I can enter this instance token into one of the config files of my application. And anytime my application gets deployed in Apprenda, we will token switch and replace that token with the actual connection data that will allow me to send logs to Splunk. So if I were to click on show here, one of the things that we're showing here is the full JSON file of the access token that we're providing to the developer. So the developer can now parse this JSON and be able to know exactly how to push my data into Splunk. If we were to switch over to our Visual Studio here, one of the things that you'll notice is I have a splunk.config file, and this is exactly where I provided the add-on. So instead of putting the real value here and coding my application based on a hard-coded static value, I provide an add-on here, and Apprenda will give me the real value for this add-on at deployment time so that I can get access to the Splunk integration capability. Eric, we have a lot of add-ons in Apprenda. You want to talk about some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add also to some of the points that you've talked about, Michael, the tokenizing the add-on also makes it so that as a developer, you can have your consistent SDLC pipeline going from your development environment to your UAT environment, your production environment, and all of these environment configuration capabilities are tokenized. So you have your one code base as a developer, as long as, of course, the expectation is there that this add-on exists on the different environments, which is what you would do normally anyways. The connection information gets replaced when you deploy your application to the different environments. What that also gives the operations team the ability to do is have different implementations for the different environments. So you can have a Splunk add-on on development that behaves differently than the Splunk add-on on the development, on the test environment, the UAT environment, the production environment. But as a developer, the way to consume this becomes very consistent. You don't have to change that connection information. And another thing that's important about add-ons is that they're not only meant there to expose public cloud services. We have customers that are building add-ons for internal file share storage, things like NetApp filers, for example, as mentioning some of those that we have built already. Or they have their own systems. We've worked with customers that already have built database as a service capabilities, or they've built other as a service capabilities internally with their own OpenStack or different IaaS platforms. And they simply want to expose, because they already have those APIs, they want to expose now what's the consumption model. And putting those things in Apprenda makes it extremely easy for developers to consume it and just leveraging them across their application. We have a whole set of services that we've built from a public cloud point of view, from an internal cloud point of view, using, for example, heat templates in OpenStack to provision things like RabbitMQ or MongoDB. There's all sorts of ways that you can build and customize these add-ons. They're extremely powerful for organizations to leverage as you move your application away as well from all of these environments.
Yeah, that's very cool. And one of the things that you mentioned there with the SDLC pipeline, that's a really important cause. If you had to hard code different settings depending on if you're in a dev test environment or a sandbox or a production, that means you have different copies of your application. The ability to token switch these things in real time before you deploy makes it all much simpler to have a single source of truth. So let's look at some of our applications here and log some messages and see what they look like in Splunk. So the first thing we can do here is we can look at our malicious logger here. Let's go ahead and launch our application. And this is a simple test application that basically will send a whole bunch of messages into Apprenda all at the same time. So to demonstrate that, and showcase how that works, we'll bring up our PowerShell script here. And this is a sample PowerShell script that's also on GitHub that allows me to get some statistics about the log aggregation and the forwarding into Splunk. These are not persistent statistics. We could make them persistent into database if we wanted to, but they're reset every time you reboot your WCF service. So over here, we notice that we have already forwarded about 21,000 log messages. We had 0 failed uploads, 0 exceptions, and our queue is 0. This is a queue that allows inter-process communication. Think of this as a workload queue for the log forwarder for every instance of our WCF service. So let's go ahead and send 2,000 messages here, all at 500 size, and we'll make them all fatal. So when I click submit here, what's going to happen, you notice here that we were able to log messages at the rate of almost 6,000 messages per second. This is a relatively small size Apprenda platform. Our logging throughput can be much, much higher than that. But for this platform, 6,000 messages per second is fairly impressive to begin with. So now I was able to send that, and I can come back here and run my query again and notice how we increase the number of send messages by a couple of thousand. So very quickly, our service was able to take that incoming rate of logs and push them to Splunk right away. And when we go to the Splunk dashboard, you will notice that as well. The next thing that I want to showcase here before we move to Splunk is I'm going to open up test logger here. And I want to log a very specific message so we can go back into Splunk and look for it. So I'm going to log it at error level, and I'm going to call it and I'm going to go ahead and log that message. So there you go. So I was able to make a WCF service call into Apprenda, and I logged it. Now, one of the things I want to mention here, these are regular Apprenda applications. So by logging here, whether that was with the malicious logger or this login, essentially what you're doing is you're saying, hey, I'm an Apprenda application. I'm going to log a regular message back to the platform. With our highly distributed enterprise logging capabilities from Apprenda, we can ingest logs from any application, whether they're .NET or Java. We use Log4Net for Java, so you can have things like appenders and overrides, and we even have some advanced capabilities in Apprenda on our logging framework. So you could do things like masks, so you can mask some of the content of logs before they're pushed into the platform. And these masks will also apply to Splunk. You can do log overrides. So you can actually override either the logging level or any other capability from any application, whether that's Java, .NET, Docker, or so on or so forth. So we have all of these capabilities that can create an enterprise logging platform that allows you to collect the logs from every instance of your application, apply the masks, apply the overrides, and then push them into the platform, and then potentially push them into an operational intelligence platform like Splunk. Eric, are you ready to move into Splunk and look at some of this logging?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. And one of the things that I'll add as well, talking about logging specifically, right, is from a developer's point of view, the way that you can consume these things or these logs capability from Apprenda is you can either call directly or API, which will give you contextual information. That's something that's very important because any log message being captured by the Apprenda platform has automatically a lot of contextual information stored around it. So things like which machine did the message come from? You can add filters or overrides on specific parts of your code, different classes. If you're leveraging Apprenda's authentication capabilities, then you would see the user that actually triggered the message, which application it came from. And then from a developer's point of view, you can create your own overrides. Of course, it's not only an operator, the operator will get visibility, but developers can manage and configure their own set of logs from their developer portal or the REST API. You can stream your logs, you can filter them, you can create notifications and aggregations. If the logs, you get a bunch of repetitive logs, you can have the platform capture that and send you a notification around that. And you don't only have to use our API. We have built, for example, appenders to some of the more common frameworks like Michael mentioned. So if you're using Log4Net or Log4j in your application, the platform will automatically reconfigure your app at deploy time and add an appender so that your logs will automatically be captured and showed by the platform. So we make it very consistent and easy for a developer to simply use these logging framework on the Apprenda platform and leverage all of these capabilities that we're talking about. So let's go ahead, Michael, and dig in and go to Splunk and see some of these messages show up.
Absolutely. And before we move on to that, one of the things that Eric was mentioning here is this system event management in the login page of Apprenda, where you can view all the logs, the contextual information that Eric mentioned, and there's a similar page for the developer in the developer portal. You can do things like searching, do some filtering based on dates, or filtering based on the type of application that you have, and so on and so forth. So let's switch over to Splunk now, which is a much more powerful framework. So the first thing I want to do here is I'm going to run my search based on my index. And remember, I create an index called Apprenda logs. So if I click on that and run my search here, I get a complete view of all of the data that we sent. And I can see buckets here based on a per hour basis. I can see all of the filters here that Splunk has created based on the data that Apprenda sent. And notice here that this is a single log message that we forwarded from Apprenda into Splunk. It's in a JSON format, so that allows Splunk to basically create categories for every field that we have here. So we have fields for developer ID, for example, the different developers in the platform, and it's showing you the count, percentage of logs sent, and so on and so forth. You can click on things like log level and look at the different log levels that we have logged into the platform. You can look at things like source, and you can see the different components of Apprenda that have logged the most messages. One of the things that's most evident here is that the heartbeat pump has sent the most logs. One of the things I did is I put the platform at info log level, which means log everything. And every time that we heartbeat that our applications are up and running, alive and healthy, we log a message to demonstrate that we did that. So you can see that that occupies the majority of the log messages here on the platform. And obviously there's different things like, the version ID, the different versions of the applications running on the platform. So you can filter based on any of these values. So I can actually come here or any of these values and click on the actual log level here, and it will adjust my query based on that message. Now, you notice here, there's 2,000 log messages on log level 5. That's the 2,000 messages that we send using our malicious logger here. So 2,000 messages, and the content here is not important because it was all lots of A's. But one of the other things I can do here is I can actually search for that individual message that I sent earlier using the logger service test. So I can paste this here and use my index Apprenda logs and search for the exact text. This is a notification that I sent in Apprenda. Let's click enter here. And notice it pinpointed the exact message that I sent through Splunk. So the power of Splunk and the log aggregation here is very evident. They're very fast at both ingesting thousands and thousands and millions of logs and be able to use our index very quickly to allow you to visualize and slice and dice your data in any way you want, whether you're doing analysis, alerting, debugging, or trying to identify a trend in your system. Speaking of trends, I also went ahead and created a couple of dashboards here that give us very quick views into a couple of areas of logging in Apprenda. And I called our dashboard here Apprenda. And the three dashboards that I created are, go ahead and show me all of the log messages that are happening on a per node basis. Show me all the log messages per log level. So starting from 1, which is the debug messages, 2 is information, going all the way to 5, which are the fatal messages. And then the last dashboard I created was, go ahead and show me all of the top log messages per warning level. So in this case, I wanted to see, is there any specific message that's showing up more often than others that would allow me to go and concentrate my debugging efforts into that? So you can create as many dashboards as you want. In fact, you can go back into your search. So let's go ahead and put our index here to give us the top messages per source. So what is happening here is I would like to organize in order based on the most log messages logged by a specific endpoint in Apprenda all the way down to the 20th most frequent one. And now we'll notice again, like what I mentioned earlier, that our heartbeat pump is showing the most log messages. And then we can go top to bottom and see individual components, how many messages they logged based on the last 24 hours that our index is showing here, and what the percentage is of the full logging in the platform. I can even click on any one of these and drill into and look at either very specific events into that coming from the Chronos job, and I can do further debugging and slicing based on this data. Now we've showed you how easy it was to take Apprenda 6.6 using our operator access, be able to create the necessary policy to allow a developer to create an application that will push all of the logs coming from Apprenda into Splunk, and how easy it was to come into Splunk, look at all our logs coming from Apprenda, be able to do some advanced analytics and look at dashboards coming from the data being reported by our logs, and allow either an operator or a developer to do advanced debugging, advanced analytics, or even create nice reports that they can send to their management based on things that the platform logged. So this doesn't mean that logs need to contain only errors. You can use your logs to identify trigger points, to push KPIs into Splunk, or anything else that's important to your organization.
Yeah, this is something that's very important because a lot of people think of just logs as a way of debugging and finding the errors. And while Of course, that's one of the more common use cases. A lot of the power of this as well is for event notifications when thing happens as well, so that you can keep track of different trends, you can keep track of how your application is being used, and leverage the best tool out there for the job, right? We've seen a lot of customers request using a technology like Splunk. We've seen other customers use other different technologies, and this log forwarding abstraction layer or capabilities really allows you to use whatever tool you feel more comfortable with and whatever is best suited for the job you're trying to do, while giving developers a very, very easy, frictionless capability or access to leverage these tools. It's something very important because what you end up seeing in organizations, what we see a lot when we deploy Apprenda, is that every side of the organization, every team has their own set of tools and core competencies, right? The tools that an IT operator is going to use is different than what a developer is going to use, and it's different than what a auditor or a security professional is going to use. But you want to be able to still drive consumptions, right? And you don't want to have to retrain every single team every time you bring another tool. You don't want to retrain developers every time IT brings a new tool, and vice versa. But with this log forwarding capability, this abstraction layer, you can really just very, very easily, as you saw, developers can write logs and logs how they've always done it, using, for example, Log4Net or Log4j or standard out or whatever it is that they're using, and then still have those logs be consumed by the different professionals with all the different tools that they have across the organization without any retraining, without any certification process, without going through this. You'll drive usage of all of these tools very, very quickly, the easier you make it to consume. And you want to do it in a way that's natural to the correct consumer, right? A developer doesn't want to think in terms of infrastructure. They don't want to consume infrastructure related tools. They want to just write code and have those be published somewhere. Very, very easy. You don't have to think about it that way. The same way as an operator is going to consume and use different tools, this abstraction layer makes it very, very easy and possible for you to do that.
Absolutely. You can even set up additional users here on Splunk where you can delegate access to specific parts of the Splunk platform. You can set up alerts. You can view the reports like Eric and I mentioned. So you have a very powerful platform here that you can do operational intelligence out of the logs coming from Apprenda. Thank you so much for coming and viewing another instance of the Microlessons by the Container Brothers. Eric and I were not able to sit right next to each other this instance, but we're able to do this remotely. And thank you so much for coming and viewing our podcast.
Thanks, everyone.